What's good, everyone? It's your boy Dak908, aka the Dig Dug himself, and ladies and gents, today we're going to talk briefly about one of my favorite monsters, like ever, the Agnaktor. Now, the Agnaktor made its generational debut in the third generation. Notice a pattern here. Every single last one of these videos have been third generation debutees, you know what I mean? But nevertheless, Agnaktor made his launch here, and he was what I lovingly refer to as a tier 3 monster, a monster in which who actually is on level power-wise with that of the flagship monster of the game. And then there's other tiers for elder dragons and so on and so forth, but whatever. He's one of those guys. Now, you fight him in the volcano, so he's a bit of a hot boy, if you know what I'm talking about. He has amazing design to him. As Leviathans were introduced in the third generation, we had the water Leviathans, a couple of them actually, if not actually all of them. You actually got to fight Royal Ludroth, Gobel, Legiacris, and then eventually you get to fight Agnaktor, a Leviathan in Le Fire. So the cool thing about my man is that he is a Leviathan in the fire, and he loves to dig. Now, with all that said, let's talk about some things about him. So the first thing to really note about my man Agnaktor is that he's lovingly referred to as Clack Clack. Why Clack Clack? Because when he goes Clack Clack, after the Clack Clack goes a huge beam of like fire. You know what I mean? It's like this is beam. A lot of monsters have beams. Rajang has beams. Leviathans has a beam, had to think, but you know what I'm trying to say. A lot of monsters have beams. His beam was the fire beam. Not the first to do a fire beam, but he's the first Leviathan with the fire beam, which isn't really saying a whole lot because he's one of the first Leviathans and the only fire Leviathan who normally would have a fire beam. But with all that being said, the fire beam is to be noted and something you should definitely watch out for. He does it in 3 ways, okay? He'll do the standard beam where he'll sit there, clack, 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 boom, and then he'll beam you. He'll do this when he's like on the ground, like above ground, if you will. He has an attack, two variants where he's actually digging through the ground. Then he'll come up, only showing his top half of his body, and then he'll beam straight at you right there. And then there's also a variant where he'll do the same thing, halfway out the ground, half his body, upper half of his body, but he'll swing the beam in a 360 kind of. Well, I think it's more like maybe like a 270, because the last couple of degrees it doesn't actually have a hitbox, but still a huge, let's just say 360 degree radius. Now, it isn't that like that close to his body, so whenever he does a 360 degree one, if you get really close to him, he's just dinner, you know what I mean? So you can smack him real nice like that. Outside of his beam, which is his most notable thing to actually look out for, he has a couple other attacks. His main attack outside of that, it will be like his beaks, like he'll beak slam at you, like he'll walk and he'll slam his beak into the ground, slam his beak into the ground, slam his beak into the ground, that kind of thing. He has a hip check. Believe it or not, in Try, he has the second strongest hip check in the game. I had to think. Devil Joe has the first, Agnaktor has the second. Believe it or not. Diablo's actually kind of lower to the bottom. I know this is a random fact of the day, but yeah, Agnaktor has the second strongest hip check in the game. So outside of that, his hip check, his beak slams, him digging through the ground. Actually, later on in the game, as you go further in through low to high to G rank, his digging through the ground, his underwater digging, underground, because it's not like under fire. That doesn't even make any sense, because I mean he is like swimming through the magma, if you will. Nevertheless, his digging becomes incredibly absurd, really obnoxious to say the least. It's to the point where it's like, dude, can you please stop hitting me with this madness? Like, I'd like for you to leave me alone, please. But it can get a little wonky, a little crazy, a little obnoxious. But for the most part, that's all he has. Now, that's all his attacks. One last thing to note about Agnaktor before we move on to other things is that when you go to swing on him, he has some armor. Okay, if you swing on for lack of a better term, a black Agnaktor, that's when his body's completely hardened. Chances are you're gonna bounce, unless you have Mind's Eye or something like that, or an ability within your weapon that gives you natural Mind's Eye. Think Dual Blades, Demon Dance, and Switch Axe's sword. But other than that, you're probably gonna bounce. Now, how to make it to where you can smack my man is by getting him to A, use his fire attacks, or B, him going underground and then coming back up again. Now, when he goes underground and comes back up again, he's all bright and shiny, all yellowy and whatnot. That means his body is soft. Like, I mean, think of it like in actual legitimate terms. I mean, magma is what? Liquidized rock. Now, not the good kind of liquidized. It is very hot, but still it's soft. It's a soft, more malleable thing. Once it hardens, it becomes earth, rock, ground, that kind of thing. But if he superheat it again and becomes soft again, his body is the exact same way. If you superheat his body, you can smack him easier. Now, for us, well, for you brave souls out there, if you bring a fire weapon to fight Agnaktor, as silly as that would sound, it also would work in actually making his body soft so that way you can swing on him easier. So it's a thought. I mean, if you're really bothered that much by it and you just don't have Mind's Eye at all, you could bring a fire weapon. The fight might take forever, but you're able to swing on him and you know, not bounce off. Granted though, I mean, don't really think too much about it, because once you break his parts, like his arms, his chest, his back, his tail, yes, you have to break the tail and then cut the tail. One of the few tail breaks then cuts type of monsters. But if you get past that, once you break the armor, so to speak, you don't really even need Mind's Eye. You don't really need him to get soft again. He's just like brittle, and you can just smack him for free. So I don't know, maybe not use a fire weapon by yourself. Maybe have one person bring a fire weapon, swing on him a little bit, and after that everybody just kind of slaps him for free, that kind of thing. You know what I'm trying to get at here. But yeah, that's Agnaktor though, one of my favorite monsters ever. But let's talk about the gear, because his gear has gone through not necessarily a lot of changes, but at least in this game it's actually quite nice, because if you're like a lancer like me, a very defensive kind of player, he'll be not your probably your first, but anyway, a weapon, excuse me, a armor set that you could use, potentially use for lances and so on. Now, if I'm remembering correctly, because I don't know, I'm doing all this off of memory, I'm not really looking anything up because, you know, whatever, I'm just yelling into a microphone. The Agnaktor, at least in low rank, he's the guard one. So if you're a guard lancer like myself, like I spoke a little bit earlier, guard is going to be your skill for lancing, at least in this game where there's not a whole lot of things you can use for a lance. Maybe your guard and skill, maybe one or two other offensive skills, but for the most part, Agnaktor is going to be your guard lancing set. Now, once you get into high in G rank, at least for Agnaktor, his armor isn't like that great. I mean, you can get some things out of it though. If you have a really good talisman, you can actually gem in guard, because it gives you constitution, and you have, I think, razor sharp. I think it gives you razor sharp. So you have, let's say, hypothetically, theoretically, guard, constitution, and razor sharp. Honestly, guard, constitution, and razor sharp, and like maybe one other thing, like, I don't know, Mind's Eye or some crit or whatever, and you got a pretty solid set. I think outside of that, it gives you like something useless like flame or whatever, or fire attack, which is also kind of useless. But for the most part, the armor is pretty you know, it's mid. You know, it's some mid. I ain't gonna lie to you, it's some mid. Glacial Agnaktor is where he gets some godlike stuff, because Glacial Agnaktor takes over the lance set, the whole guard, if you will. And on the Glacial Agnaktor, you get both guard and guard up, and I think you can also squeeze Mind's Eye in there as well for free. So like, yeah, like it's pretty freaking good. But for the most part, I mean, Agnaktor stuff is okay. And as far as weapons go, I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm gonna be 100% real with you. Agnaktor's weapons have never been great, because they've always been outclassed by literally Rathalos. I mean, they try to find something to do with Agnaktor stuff. I mean, the design of a lot of his weapons look really cool. Like in Try, he had the only blue sharpness weapon in low rank, period. It was his longsword. But I mean, once you get into higher rank and you like max out and everything, of course, again, Rathalos comes and he just outclasses him in general. And the same thing happens. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of sharpness, which is weird because he has the only blue weapon in low rank. But he doesn't have a whole lot of sharpness. It's usually a lot of green sharpness for a lot of his things. It does have quite a bit of element, but at the same time, if you don't have a lot of sharpness, you better have a lot of attack. Which the case is for Agnaktor, his attack, and compared to that of like Rathalos' attack, is kind of the same, if not a little bit more for Rathalos. So you don't have the same sharpness, you don't have the same attack. He has some affinity to him and a little bit of element, but like, dude, it's just outclassed. So if you look for fire weapons from Agnaktor, unfortunately don't. I mean, everything he has is outclassed by that of Rathalos, which is, I guess, okay, but still, it's something to note. I like to think in like GU and so on, they kind of give him a little more, you know what I mean? But for the most part, at least in this game, not so much. I'd give his weapons a pass. His armor, I'd give a rock for low rank and a pass for high and G rank. But honestly, guys, that's everything I can tell you about the Agnaktor, because, you know, just Agnaktor, you know, I love the guy. He's amazing. His subspecies is probably a monster I like even more, because he's incredibly godlike, but I think I already made a video about that. If not, we can probably talk about him a little bit more. But with that being said, everyone, thank you so much for communicating with me today. Let me know what you want to see next as far as monsters go. Also, I wanted to make this Agnaktor video a lot earlier, but some stuff happened IRLs. It's nothing crazy, but what I told myself not to do is I told myself not to worry about forcing a video when I'm not 100%. I only want to make videos when I'm 100% so that way I don't get myself burned out and I don't feel all weird about stuff, because that's why I don't make videos that often anymore, because I feel weird about stuff and I'm like, oh no, woe is me, blah blah blah. But if you don't force stuff in those situations, you don't get them situations, you know what I'm saying? So I'm just trying to play it nice and easy. But with that being said, it's been your boy. Let me know who you want to see next. If you want to see another 3rd gen recipient, someone who actually appeared in the 3rd gen and stayed there forever, I got your back. If not, we can express our love for other monsters who are also in this gen. But with that said, take care.